Elliot Cadeau comes in after 2 seasons at North Carolina. He reclassified up a year to the 2023 class. So that usually doesn't work out when, especially guards, it feels like. You see it more with guards, I guess. But when they reclassify and move up a grade, it worked out for him, I would say, relatively speaking. He's the starting point guard 2 seasons ago now on a North Carolina team that was the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. They make the Sweet 16. They lose to Alabama in that game. And then this past year starts again, improved himself quite a bit, averaged 9.2 points, 5.9 assists, and 2.8 rebounds in 27.2 minutes per game. He's one of the top passers in the country. He led the ACC in assists. The stat that stands out to me the most is that he ranked in the 99th percentile nationally with 3.4 assists per game on shots at the rim. So his teammates are getting shots at the rim, easy buckets created by Elliot Cadeau. That is something that Michigan didn't get enough of this past season, and Dusty May was pretty open about that fact. And it's one of the reasons why he kept praising LJ Kaysen towards the end of the season, that he actually could get them some of those looks. You know, the dump off to Vlad that they had against Michigan State on his radio show the next day, they spent like 5 minutes talking about it because there weren't too many of those plays this season. It's a credit to Vlad, Danny, all the other guys for getting their own shot, but he created some of that for them. LJ Kaysen did, and they're going to get more of that with Elliot Cadeau. Turnover issues. 5th worst turnover rate in the ACC. Very high usage, but still, that's percentage-wise. Percentage of his possessions, a lot of turnovers. Some of them decision-making, some of them bad passes, that sort of thing. 3-point shooting has been a big issue for him. Teams can sag off of him a little bit. Improved his number from 19% to 34% this past season, so did work on it in the offseason. I saw an interview with Hubert Davis the other day from last summer where he said that Elliot Cadeau looks like a completely different player, talked about the things he was working on. And one of the things was 3-point shooting, so he improved. And then another concern is just the size defensively with the way Michigan wants to switch, 6'1", 180. But so there's a lot of good here. There's a lot of things that I think you question, and we're just going to have to wait and see how it fits. But definitely bring something to the table that Michigan didn't have much of last season. He doesn't just bring it, he brings it in droves.
I did a radio hit this week on Sirius with John Crispin. Was on the other end of the phone call, and
big fan.
He compared Cadeau to a guy like Xavier Simpson as a guy who maybe offensively a bit limited, but a playmaker. Again, the word polarizing has come up in a number of spots when it comes to him, and that could just be sour grapes from the North Carolina end, but it is a word you keep seeing when you look him up. But again, to me, it all comes down to how all the puzzle pieces fit together. So you almost kind of make, you rate this edition a bit of an incomplete until you know what he's playing with next to him. I think that they do need to add some shot making on the wing, whether it be via the transfer portal, whether it be, maybe Trey McKinney pops a little earlier than expected. I think he's going to be very good. He's going to have a role. But, if you're telling me the backcourt next year is primarily, Cadeau, let's say Namari Burnett comes back for a 6th season, which is possible, but I don't know how likely it is at this point, along with LJ Kaysen, along with McKinney, and I guess you can kind of throw Roddy Gale into that mix as well. I just feel like they need a little more offense in their backcourt, but, from a playmaking perspective, I think it was Evan Mia who had put this out the other day. Kind of graded, I think, out as an A+ in that category on whatever metrics he was using on his site. So I think it's a solid, shrewd basketball move, and obviously former 5-star guy, and maybe you find a way to get a little more, tap into that a little bit more. Maybe that's something they're able to do. So I'll say in terms of guard development, I think that Hubert Davis in North Carolina have left a little bit on the table in that regard. So that might be something to keep an eye on. I mean, you asked North Carolina this year if they would have rather had what they had or had Caleb Love on their roster. Then again, that was kind of an extracurricular thing that played into his departure a couple of years ago. So Cadeau, it's solid. He's I think still in the top 40, top 50 in terms of transfer portal guys. You've paired him with a pretty good big man that's athletic that we'll talk about here in a little bit. Again, just kind of incomplete on it because we know that there are. I mean, it wouldn't be a surprise to have them fill 5-6 spots via the portal.
And part of the incomplete to me is the potential, right? That's why it's incomplete as well, as like he might be a lot better. He is older, so he's kind of the age of now the grade that he's in. He reclassified up, but he's 20 years old. He'll turn 21 before the season. But still, I think there's a lot of upside there, and he will be coached as you.
I'll say this too.
May, who's much better than Hubert Davis.
I'll say this too. I mean, running the point on a team, at least this year. Let me go back to last year's numbers real quick. North Carolina was 41st in 2023, 2024 in tempo. This year they were 34th. So you're getting a point guard that is experienced and playing in one of those fast type of systems, which lends itself to some of the turnovers. But this is, it's a fit. It works, and I see what the vision is. There's more work to do here, obviously.
For sure. And that's a great point too. I think he'll allow them to do that. He's really good in the pick and roll, so he'll be able to, to add more there, because you're not going to have Danny Wolf as the guy who's running some of the most pick and rolls on your team this next year. And if you do, it's an absolute bonus, right? There's obviously a slight chance that he could come back, but wouldn't expect it. It's also worth mentioning when you look at it too, North Carolina, he's the freshman point guard on that team that reclassified. They're 15th in the country last year and 2 years ago now in offensive efficiency. And this past season, when they made the tournament but probably shouldn't have, they were 21st. So he's still running efficient offenses, had much less shooting, much less talent around him this past season, and they were still efficient. So a lot to like here about the pickup. And I'm sure he'll be mentioned as we move into Morez Johnson Jr. as well, because big man point guard pairing. Michigan lands Illinois transfer Morez Johnson Jr. 3 years of eligibility left after wrapping up his freshman season at Illinois. 6'9", 255 pounds. Really a joy to watch play basketball this past season. He did not play against Michigan because he had broke his wrist a couple weeks prior against Michigan State on one of the more crazy athletic plays you'll see. Blocks a transition layup attempt by Trey Holloman of Michigan State. Two-handed block in transition, running the floor back. You're going to get that type of motor from him on every possession. He's going to play more than the 18 minutes he played per game this past season. So, but I wouldn't expect that motor to slow down at all. This is kind of your 6'9" replacement for Vladislav Golden. I would predict here, and you still need another big or two to pair with him, along with Will Cheddar and Oscar Goodman being able to play the four a little bit potentially if he's ready to go in what would technically be his redshirt freshman season. But Anthony, I was told that less than 12 hours after Michigan lost to Auburn, Akeem Miskadeen, Michigan's assistant coach, hopped on a plane to see Morez Johnson. They get that one done. It kind of reminds you last year of when they kept going, like batting 1,000 on guys that were official visitors. And one, it speaks to, all right, the guys we want, we can get on campus, and the guys we want us to see the vision, are impressed by the coaching staff. But Morez Johnson comes here. He averaged 7 points, 6.7 rebounds last year. One of the better rebounders in the country. His 17.2% offensive rebounding rate would have ranked first in the Big Ten by almost 3% had he met the 40% minutes threshold. And he only didn't because of that injury that held him out, I believe, 8 games or something like that. But then this stat stands out the most too. To talk about one with Cadeau and one with Johnson. This is the one I would look at. Illinois rebounded 41.6% of their missed shots when he was on the floor and 32.1% when he was off. I mean, he's that big of a difference maker on the glass. And we talked about, okay, Elliot Cadeau, he brings the playmaking that Dusty May said they didn't have this past season. What else did they talk about all year long that they needed? Physicality. They needed to be better on the glass. And this guy brings that in droves. So you add something, kind of a different element here while also replacing Vlad Golden.
Yeah, and I love Vlad Golden. I love what he was able to do. Watching him at FAU, obviously a pleasure to get to watch him at Michigan this season. But would get pushed around a little bit, against teams in the top half of this league. And Morez Johnson Jr. is not going to have that issue at all. I think he plays bigger than 6'9" because of his effort. We've had people ask, well, how do you mitigate the loss of that size? Well, when you rebound the heck out of the basketball and you play physically and you live up to the challenge, that's a big part of it too. So we've talked about how, winning there are things Dusty wants to do while holding up in the front court in a Big Ten style of roster. And this addresses that in a nice way. And he's not, you look at his shot chart, it's all in the paint. He's not a guy that's going to step out and shoot, mid-range jumpers or even shoot any threes like Vlad would do now and then. This is a guy that I think, again, just a solid, shrewd top 30 addition, but addresses one of their biggest needs in a big way. Kind of reminds me of, at least from a production standpoint, you should probably expect about what they got from Terrace Reed last year, just in terms of production. But this guy doesn't have oven mitts or cast iron skillets for hands either. He's not going to turn over the basketball like that. I like it a lot, and I think that he is, at least right now. I know Illinois had a Visic, but he's got the clearest path to playing time as probably anyone on this roster at the moment. So nice addition for them. The opportunity's there, and excited to see how they how he grows.
For sure. And I think he's going to look to expand his game, though. Every shot, like you said, last year was in the paint, didn't attempt anything outside of the paint, wasn't asked really to do much offensively in terms of running stuff for him, but he created his own offense. 30.8% of his field goal attempts came on second chance opportunities. So, okay, he's one of those guys. You don't need to feed him a ton for him to still make an impact on scoring. And he had an 8-game stretch there. I believe it was 5 times in double figures in 8 games until he got hurt. He had 17 and 5 against Michigan State before he went down with the injury on that ridiculous play and broke his wrist. But yeah, I think that there's room for him to grow that offensive role. I have heard that he can shoot the ball, just wasn't asked to do it. And a lot of big guys are kind of working on that behind the scenes. Like if you watch some of these guys in practice and they're shooting, they can definitely do it. It's just like, where do you find those looks within the flow of the offense? Is it a better shot at time? You got to get it good enough for a guy to, it to be a better shot than somebody else. I think Dusty May talked about it with Vlad. I want to go back and get the exact quote, but didn't he say like you need to be kind of working on it at a high level behind the scenes for like a year or two before you can really debut it? And Vlad hadn't attempted a 3 in his entire career until this season at Michigan, and he hit some big ones. He went a long stretch there without hitting any, because I think he got a little overboard with shooting some after he hit 3 in that Northwestern game. But so there's room there for him to expand the game. You mentioned Tomislav Visic that he played alongside at Illinois. Visic was the 5, and Morez Johnson, when he entered the starting lineup, was the 4. So he can play that way defensively. He's versatile enough. If you did have to have him switch on the perimeter, he could do it. I think that he's penciled in right now as their 5, but it all depends on who you can get as the big man next to him, I think. And we'll talk about that here shortly. But it's going to be interesting. I think you have a pick and roll partner for Elliot Cadeau. I think that, his ability to finish down low, he made 64% of his twos this past year, but that number was 70% in a 20-game stretch after he kind of settled in starting in late November. So that's a really, really good rate. So he's going to be able to finish some of those buckets or those shots that Elliot Cadeau creates for him. 2 lob dunks last year. I would expect that to reach 10 plus this coming season, which is nice. Michigan didn't have many of those this past season either.
Well, another stat of the day, maybe talk about players that have played on teams that play fast. Illinois 17th in tempo this year on KenPom. So he's used to running up and down the floor too, and that's exciting. So a nice box check and that's not the be all end all. There's a lot of other guys from a lot of different programs they're looking at, but the fact that it looks like you've gotten 2 starters now that are used to playing fast, playing up-tempo basketball, I think that's great. And that, you have to spend, when you have guys that have done it, you spend less of your time teaching it. And I think that's a good thing.
For sure. And we have to mention the upside here too. 3 years left of a guy who's probably not going pro until he exhausts his eligibility. And then who knows? I could see it. He's only 6'9". That'll hurt him. But, if he can switch and if he does expand his game to being able to hit some jumpers, maybe down the road. But that's down the road. Like everything's year to year now in college basketball. But if you get this guy for 2-3 years, that is really nice for your long-term future. Not everything's just for next season, although it kind of is in college basketball right now, but it's worth mentioning.
And of course he could ball out and go grab a bag from someone else after this next year. That's where we're at too.
You got to retain.